But, you know, when they gave the drugs at a very early stage, it was able to suppress the whole, you know, virus in the system. Those are two very isolated cases. And if you remember that there are over 33 million people carrying the HIV virus, this is not something that can be done on a routine. The only answer that we're all looking for is a vaccine, you know, and that is very far away. A vaccine that can prevent HIV. It is only then we now know, you know, that yes, we have overcome, you know, the epidemic. Right now, there may be these isolated cases. And by the way, there are many people in this world, I won't say many, who have HIV, but it doesn't do them anything.
Now, since the coming of the agency NACA, or since its establishment, 3.4 million Nigerians, you say, are living with the HIV and AIDS even as we speak. But would you say the number has, you know, declined, or is it increasing? Is it still increasing at the moment?
Well, the number has hovered around 3.4 million. And it's not surprising. Has the population in Nigeria remained static? The answer is no, because these are projections. What happens is that we look at the prevalence in the in various populations or among pregnant women, and then we now use a software to look at, you know, the population. Nigeria now is about 170 million. So, you know, if 3.4 million of this is HIV positive, it's a lot better than, you know, 3.4 million when we were like, you know, 140 or thereabout. The truth of the matter is that, yes, there has been a gradual decline in the number of new infections. But the problem Nigeria has is that we have huge populations. And the thing about our population is that it's like a pyramid, you know, with a huge base down, you know. What I mean by that is 70% of the population is below 30. 45% of the population is below 15. So every year you can see the number of young people moving from no sex to sex, perhaps with very little information about how to protect themselves from sexually transmitted infections or even HIV. So every year you're having this huge cohort, you know, moving into sex without adequate information. That's one of the big issues that we have, you know, trying to drive enough information to people. Most people are aware about HIV, but whether or not they can change behavior to ensure that, you know, they don't contract it, it's a whole different ballgame.
So how do you feel the states and indeed the local governments, you know, how can they come in to really drive the message home, you know, in terms of the behavioral lifestyles of our youths in trying to address this trend of HIV and AIDS?
This is where, you know, we're doing a lot of things now. First of all, being very strategic. We've looked at the map of Nigeria in terms of the prevalence. And about 12 states and the FCT are responsible for 70% of the burden. So we're asking ourselves, if we want to invest wisely, if we want to invest in such a way that we have good returns by lowering the incidence and the prevalence of HIV, we should actually be going after those 12 plus 1 states. So we're actually doing that right now. Well, you know, our activities are going on around the whole country, but we are driving it more in these 12 plus 1 states. In doing so, we can now address not only HIV, but, you know, other infectious diseases like TB, malaria, and then we're addressing maternal and child health. So this is one of the things that we're doing. But it's got to be, you know, a project or program of the people, for the people, by the people. That's the way to do it. If you do it that way, you know, because it's owned, it's sustained. That's even the research that we're trying to do now. We're trying to use local social scientists, you know, from the various universities. You go to every state now, all states have universities. There are social scientists. We're not using enough of them. You know, it's easy to say, I go to a state and I say, it's because of TBS. It may be more than that. So the question is, can we engage the social scientists working with us to identify what are the root causes of why, you know, a state that is so rich, only 8% of the women, you know, go to antenatal care and get tested. So these are all the things that we're doing, trying to make sure that what we do is evidence-based, and what we do is partnering with the communities and making sure that it's sustainable. But the primary health care is the focus. Because if we do HIV, we do blood pressure, we do diabetes, we're actually bringing health, and human capital development to the community.
Well, which brings me to the issue of funds, for the agency NACA. You talk of all these policies and programs and what the agency intends to achieve, but you ask if these funds are really available for NACA to be able to implement. So what can you tell us about that?
Well, I would say I'm lucky, but we still have issues. Since I came in here, we have had a good inflow of funds from donors, particularly from the U.S. government, from the Global Fund, from the World Bank. When I say lucky, we've worked hard at it because these things just don't fall from the sky to you. You've got to do a proposal, you've got to justify it. And as we speak this week, we've got the World Bank, we've got the Global Fund, we've got USG coming from Washington and Geneva. They're all, in fact, in the next, as I leave you, we're going to have a big meeting with all the big guys from the Global Fund. So we're very, very grateful to them. But there's a but. In the last 3-4 years, there is declining and a plateauing of, foreign funds from donors. And you and I understand this. The economic climate in the West is very bad now. So many of them are no longer even supporting. And those that are supporting are actually reducing, So they're telling us that we need to look inwards, particularly looking at it, with the broad view of the MDGs and the post-2015 agenda. And it's a huge recommitment to say, look, we know that the funds coming from the donors is declining. We need to put in a lot more. Secondly, we also know, and I'm speaking on the declaration now, all this 70% of the funds that come in here actually go to buy the commodities, drugs, test kits, condoms, etc. Why can't we produce some by ourselves? And in doing so, we will transfer technology, we'll give more employment to our people, and this is more sustainable. So, and then to cap it off, our president launched his plan, the president's comprehensive response plan on HIV/AIDS. And this is the first African head of state to actually develop his own plan. The plan that we've been using, we saw one from President George Bush. That's the PEPFAR plan. This is the first. And we are going to UNGAS in the next 2 weeks to go and amplify that, the Abuja plus 12, and perhaps, the plan that our president has launched. Because it's a good example for all Africa.
Now, finally, Professor, before I let you go, because we're really running out of time, and that has to do with, the manpower, or the personnel that is available, at your disposal, talking about NACA, in order to carry out all of these targets that you've talked about. Of course, you made mention earlier, that there seems to be some challenge in that area, but how do you intend to address this?
We're actually doing that now. We're actually engaging very high quality staff here. We even have been able to establish a department for resource mobilization that's looking at all those. And as far as the whole country is concerned, we do not need to reinvent the wheel. Many of the things we do in HIV, they are not rocket science. So we need to task shift and task share. And examples of this already abound. If you go to a very busy clinic, I used to run a clinic, before I came here in Jos, where we had 15,000 people, accessing care in that clinic. And on a clinic day, we used to get 400, 500 people with about 5-6 doctors. And then you find you cannot do everything. The question is, what can the doctor, give the nurse to do? And what can the nurse give to somebody else? So if you shift past that way, for example, if you were stable and you didn't need any complications, you didn't have any complications, you didn't need any evaluation, the nurse can write your drugs, because it's just like, similarly, there's so many things, counseling, etc., which the layman can do now. I just told you that in many parts of Africa now, you don't even need to be a medical person. You can be trained to test people. Because the question of looking at changes in color of things. And you say this person is positive, it says, and then you have other tests that will even help to guide you to ensure that the thing is confirmed. So I think we all agreed now that that's the way to go. In our new plan, we want to double the number of people on drugs. We currently have about 500,000 people on drugs out of 1.5 that need it. We want to go to 1 million in the next 2 years. We don't have all the doctors. We don't have all the nurses. So there are things we have to do out of the box. I think that all of us understand this, and we have a new guideline by WHO, which actually is, promoting that. We have to do that. And if we don't want people to die of HIV, if we don't want to have new infections, and if we want to bring down the level of stigma and discrimination, we have no choice but to do that. All of us have to be, some kind of expert, in quotes.
So in other words, you're saying that everybody indeed has a role to play. It doesn't matter whether you're a health worker or you're just a layman. We have to do what we can to ensure that HIV and AIDS is well, brought under control, if not totally eradicated. Well, I guess we'll just have to end it there. Professor John Idoko, we thank you so much for spending time with us on Question Time.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you
Thank you very much. Thanks.
The battle to have an HIV and AIDS-free society is one that will surely continue in the world we live in, and Nigeria certainly cannot afford to be left behind. Even as research into finding a cure for the dreadful disease continues, Nigerians now expect that NACA will continue to lead the way in making sure that the country in no distant future isn't held captive by this global pandemic. Now, the various state governments and indeed local governments as well must do all they can now to partner with NACA to help reducing the disease in our rural and urban areas so as to avoid any drawback for the country's growth, productivity and development. Health, as we all know, is wealth. Well, that's our package for this week. Do remember to send us your questions, comments and suggestions to questiontime@channelstv.com, or you can watch us online also via channelstv.com. Thanks for watching. I'm Ayotun Balogun, and it's bye for now.